So we'll just finish up section 1.7. Problems 30, 29, 30, 31, and 32 all have four terms. If I have four terms, I'm going to factor by grouping. I'm not going to rewrite it with three terms, although I might be able to. To factor by grouping, you put the first two terms in a parentheses, the second two terms in a parentheses, and if that middle sign is negative, I shove it in that second parentheses. So four terms grouping. First parentheses, I'm going to pull out a common factor of an x and be left with a 2x minus 3. Second parentheses, the first term is negative, so I need to factor out a negative. I can factor out a 4 because 4 is the biggest number that goes evenly into 8 and 12. I factored out a negative, so I'll change the sign. That negative goes to positive. I factored out a 4, so I'll divide that 8 by 4 and get a 2. I'll leave the x. This positive is going to flip to negative because I factored out a negative. This 12 I'm going to divide by 4 and make a 3. I see my common parentheses, so I'm going to write the common parentheses first, followed by what's in front of the common parentheses. That's what I normally do, but a lot of students have been taught to write what's in front of the common parentheses followed by the common parentheses. Doesn't make any difference. It's just whatever your preference is. 32, I could definitely combine and make this into a three-term problem, but because it has four terms, I'm just going to group. That's my go-to when I see four terms, is just go to grouping. Insert my two parentheses. I don't need the sign inside the second parentheses. First parentheses, there's a common factor of an x. I'll be left with an x plus 1 when I factor out an x from the first parentheses. Second parentheses, there's a common factor of a 12. I'll be left with an x plus 1 when I factor out the 12. And then I'm going to write my answer as x plus 1 times x plus 12. That's my go-to. I usually write the common parentheses first, but you can certainly write x plus 12 times x plus 1. You can always pause the video and try to guess what I'm going to write before I write it. Like, it'd be like the best way to go through these videos rather than just watching and not trying to do what I do. 34 has three terms. It has lead coefficient of 2. It's not 1, so I'm going to rewrite this as four terms and factor by grouping. In order to do that, I'm going to multiply the 2 and the 9 and get 18. I need to find numbers that multiply to 18, double plus, and they have to add to 9. Double plus because there's no minuses. My choices would be 1 times 18, those are double plus, they multiply to 18. 2 times 9, that's double plus, it multiply to 18. And 3 times 6, that's double plus, multiply to 18. The 3 and 6 are going to be the pair that I need, because if I add 3 and 6, I get 9. So I'm going to take the 9x in my problem and rewrite it as 3x plus 6x. I could have rewritten as 6x plus 3x. That doesn't matter. So I'm going to take this problem and rewrite it as 2x squared plus 3x plus 6x plus 9. I have four terms now. I'm going to introduce my sets of parentheses. Sign goes in front of the second parentheses because it's plus. First parentheses, I'm going to factor out an x and be left with a 2x plus 3. Second parentheses, I'm going to factor out a 3. I'll divide 6 by 3 and get 2, and I'll leave the x. I'll divide 9 by 3 and get 3. And then I'm just going to write one answer. I can write in either order, common parentheses by what's in front of the common parentheses. Both of those factors need to be in my answer, any order. So x plus 3 and 2x plus 3 would be perfect. 35 and 36 lead with a negative and there's not a common factor, so I need to pull out a negative 1. I can't factor so well if the first term is negative. My rules for how to break up the numbers don't really even work if you don't factor out the negative. So factoring out a negative 1, I just flip the signs. The positive x squared turns to negative. The negative 5x turns to positive. The positive 6 turns to negative. Pretty quickly I'm going to be able to write an answer. And I'm going to be able to sight factor, because it's 3 terms and there's not a number in front of the x squared. I'm going to split the x squareds up into a couple of x's, and then I'll pull out my template if I can find it. I've got so many papers here now. I'll pull out my template, and plus and minus, I need to split that minus 6 up into a plus and a minus, big number plus. Let me just try to say that more clearly. So I'm hunting for numbers that multiply to -6, big plus, small minus, and they have to quote unquote add, it's really subtract to the 5. So my numbers that I can choose from, big number plus, small number minus, that multiply to -6. 6 times -1 is -6. 3 times -2 is -6. Now I'll add these. I'm going to go 6 plus -1, which is really the same as 6 minus 1. That gives me a 5. And 3 plus -2, that's really 3 minus 2. That gives me a 1. This is the pair of numbers I need because they multiply to the -6, they add to the 5. So one of my parentheses needs a +6. Another one of my parentheses needs a -1. Order is irrelevant here, and you don't need the 1 up in front of the parentheses. You could make this a negative sign followed by the parentheses x minus 1 times x plus 6. All right, 4 more problems to go. They all are trinomials, which is kind of, I don't know, nice, it just is. Let's do 37 together just to knock out one of your problems. On 37, the first term is negative. I know I at least have to factor out a negative, and all the numbers are divisible by 3. There's a common factor of 3. So to get started on 37, I'm going to factor out a negative because the first term is negative, a 3 because all the numbers are divisible by 3. That's the greatest common factor, or the opposite of the greatest common factor. Now I'm going to fill up my parentheses. I'm going to flip the signs and divide by 3. The first negative sign is going to flip to positive. 3 divided by 3 is going to be 1, so I'm going to be left with just the x squared. Next negative sign, because I factored out a negative, is going to flip to positive. I'm going to divide the 12 by 3 and get a 4. Last positive sign is going to flip to negative. I'm going to divide 36 divided by 3 and get a 12. Inside my parentheses, I have a trinomial that I think I can sight factor. I think I can sight factor it because there's not a number in front of the square term. What I'm going to need to do to sight factor this is find the correct numbers. Those numbers need to multiply to -12, and they add subtract to +4, and the big number is going to get the plus. That's from my template for the plus minus factoring. This is what's left inside the parentheses. If I look at the numbers that I can choose from, 12 times -1 multiplies to -12, big number plus, small number minus. 6 times -2 multiplies out to -12, big number plus, small number minus. And 4 times -3 multiplies to -12, big number plus, small number minus. I need the pair that gives me the 4, and that's this pair, because 6 plus -2, which is the same as 6 minus 2, gives me the 4 that I need. So the sight factoring that I'm going to finish up, one of the parentheses is going to get the +6, the other is going to get the -2. I usually do the positive first and the negative second, but there isn't anything magical about what I choose to do. You can flip-flop the order. As long as you have the same 3 factors in your answer, the order is just kind of up to you. The next 3 problems I don't see. The next few problems I don't see any common factors. They're all trinomials to lead coefficients 1, so I'm going to just try to sight factor these. For problem 40, I'm going to split my x squared up into a couple of parentheses, and then I'm going to need numbers that multiply to -11, and they add but really subtract to +10, and the big number is going to get the plus. Don't have a lot of choices because 11's a prime number. Really the only choice is 11 times -1, because Those are the only factors of negative 11 with the big number plus. Let me add these. 11 plus negative 1, which is really the same as 11 minus 1. That gives me positive 10, so I know that those are the correct numbers for my parentheses. One parentheses gets a minus 1, the other gets a plus 11. And then in either order for an answer, I'm completely flexible. It doesn't matter. I instinctively write the plus first, but it doesn't matter. You can write the minus parentheses first. 42 is another sight factoring because no 3 terms, no number in front of the square term. So let me try to break the y squared up into a couple of y's. I need plus minus numbers that multiply to negative 24 and add subtract to negative 23. And in this world, the small number is going to be plus. So I'm going to pull from my sheet the factors of negative 24. Small number plus big number minus. 1 times negative 24 fits small number plus big number minus multiplied to negative 24. 2 times negative 12 does the same. 3 times negative 8 does the same. And 4 times negative 6 does the same. I need the pair here that can give me the negative 23, and it's this one. The 1 plus negative 24, which is really the same as 1 minus 24, are going to give me that. So if I did 1 plus negative 24, or if I did 1 minus 24, I'm going to get the negative 23. And that's what I need. I need to multiply to negative 24, add subtract to negative 23. So one of my parentheses is going to get a plus 1, the other is going to be a minus 24, and you can flip-flop the order if you care to. Last problem, and we'll be done with this section. We just have 2 more sections to get through. 44 I can sight factor. It's 3 terms. There's not a number in front of the square term, so I don't need to worry about grouping. I need to hunt down for the numbers that end out my parentheses, numbers that multiply to negative 3, that add but really subtract to negative 2, and the small number gets the plus. 3 is a prime number, so I don't have a lot of choice. The only real choice I have is 1 and negative 3. Those multiply to be negative 3. And if I add 1 and negative 3, which is the same as doing 1 minus 3, 1 plus negative 3 and 1 minus 3 are the same. They're both equal to negative 2. Because that gives me the magical middle number, I know the numbers that go in my parentheses are plus 1 and minus 3. So we're completely done with this section. We just have 2 new sections to deal with. If you can factor well, the next sections are going to be not so bad. And so get really good at this section 1.7 before you jump into sections 1.8 and 1.9, because your ability to factor is going to make those sections good or bad for you.